Welcome to the It Matters podcast. I'm your host, Walter Perez, and let's dive in as we help you grow your mindset and elevate your leadership. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the It Matters podcast. I'm so glad you're joining me today because I wanted to share with you a special episode of a conversation I had at the iConnect party. Now, the iConnect party is an event we host that is helping leaders increase their influence. And I got to sit down and have a fireside conversation with a friend and a local leader, Mike Lazenby. And it was a very special conversation because Mike is an amazing leader. He has had the opportunity to coach minor hockey for 10 plus years. He's had senior leadership roles for 15 plus years. And this guy knows a thing or two about winning on and off the ice. And I wanted to share that conversation with you guys. And we get right into it. And my desire is that it'll add value to you and it'll make you a better leader. So I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Dawson Creek, British Columbia, originally up in northern BC. Met my wife in Grand Prairie, and we thought it would be fun to have 5 kids. So we have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old. Our 12-year-old is deaf, so that always adds some fun dynamics to the group. He has cochlear implants, so when he thinks he's had enough of listening to his siblings or mom and dad, he just takes them off and gets a smile and off he goes. But I've been a coach in minor sports, I guess we'll say, for all of my kids. This last year I actually was able to help out coaching all 5 of them in hockey. So that kept us busy. We've done ball hockey, we've done baseball, soccer, bit everything, but certainly hockey is where we spend a lot of our time. I spent a lot of time in leadership roles in hospitality and hotels, and currently am the director of customer service at the airport for contractors. So I have about 175 staff that I oversee there. So yeah, it's been fun. The kids certainly keep us on our toes. This weekend we had all 5 kids had a game at 1 o'clock. So my wife was with our 2 daughters in lacrosse in Airdrie, and then as they say, it takes a village. We sent one son to Stony Plain for lacrosse, another son to River Cree for ice hockey, and then I coached ball hockey in Beaumont. So it was a fun Sunday.
That's awesome. So when we were thinking of the theme for this iConnect party for June here, we landed on this idea that we wanted to talk about the championship mindset, because the championship mindset applies in all arenas, and definitely in sports you can learn so much about what drove them, how they got to that place. But yeah, I think you're a prime example right now of, you've had athletic background with coaching and all that, but even with what you mentioned in business and leadership, the championship mindset definitely applies beyond the sport world. And I'd love to hear what you think on that.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think even as coaching, that's one thing I try to focus on, is even raising good humans. Off the ice even. Our oldest son, he says he's 14, so last year it was coaching U15 hockey, and there's a lot of things that happen in U15 hockey, and you have some kids that have fully gone through puberty and some that have yet, and there's also between music and life and decisions, good and bad, but trying to explain to these kids that it goes well beyond the ice and in life and things that people look for. We try to talk about, whether it's work ethic or, school and that kind of stuff, and realizing that there is life past sports, although they're extremely important, that these are life skills, hard work and going full out in practice. How you practice is how you're going to play, and those kind of things. So certainly sports has helped in bringing that into even work and developing teams and realizing, who your star players are. And it might not be your top goal scorer, because you still need defense, you still need goaltending, you still need all those positions. And just like in work, we have a lot of team members that might not be suited for certain positions, but still realizing every part of that team is important, right?
So good.
I know, so growing up in high school, junior high, I did wrestling, I did track, soccer, and I know that even to this day, some of that mindset and some of the training that you're talking about in practice followed me into everything else I did. But I do want to encourage some of you, if you've never actually did any sort of sport, don't be discouraged. And this is why we want to have these conversations, because now you can glean off and of somebody else's experience and what did they do and how can you apply it in your arena, right? One thing I find interesting, I mean, in sports, you're going to have your share of failures, your trips. You're not going to win every time in every game, and the reality is that is true in life. And how have you seen that bridge together?
Yeah, one thing, I've talked to, I feel just being a coach, even just having 5 kids, it's like we have a team, and I think, my wife is obviously the superstar when it comes to that. But, we often talk about failure and using it as a motivator. We've talked a lot of times in dressing rooms about if you have a test, and say you were to get 37% on a test, I think most of us would feel that's a failing grade. But I believe the stat is, Ty Cobb has the highest batting average of all time, I think, at 366. So out of 1,000, at bats, he struck out, 634 times, and really only hitting the ball, getting on base 366 of those times. So it's trying to use those opportunities and realize that success can look very differently. As I say, 40% would make you by far the greatest hitter of all time, yet you're still failing 60% of the time, right? And we talk a lot about goldfish in our family, and a lot about that with hockey teams is, and I don't know the exact stat, but I think it's out there that goldfish don't have the greatest memory, or it's not that long, and we will often say if something happens, goldfish that. Just don't worry about it, goldfish it. There's one thing to be said about being knocked down and taking a moment. I know Tim Grover talks a lot about it, and taking a moment and realizing, okay, why did I get knocked down? What can I do to prevent that same thing from happening again? But at the same time, realizing that things will happen, don't dwell on that. And I find that probably happens a lot more in individual sports, or I have a son who in ball hockey is a goaltender, and last game we had to say goldfish 8 times. So luckily we ended up winning 10-8, but it talks a lot about being able to something to happen and to be able to reset. So that's kind of a big thing we talk about.
I love that, the goldfish. When you first mentioned that to me, I'm like, oh, perfect. And regardless of your age, we need to keep that on mind, because how many of you are sitting here today thinking about how bad something went this week, last year, 10 years ago, and the reality is we're letting that affect our potential moving forward, right? And so I love how you teach that, and that's part. Hey, I heard somebody, I was listening to a podcast, I think last week or whatever, and they were talking about the importance of skill sets are definitely important on a team, but culture potentially could be even more important. I'd love to know how you've kind of seen those play out in your coaching career, because you'll have good players, but does that actually make the team?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think a big part of that is developing trust as a team. Especially, I think of hockey, it's really playing your position. But, if you're in the defensive zone, you need to trust that everybody is doing their job. You have to trust that your team's going to do it, because you can be the greatest player, but if you think that you need to cover for your teammate and you get out of position, that can wreck everything. So, it's a matter of saying, I'm going to trust the people around me to do their jobs, and I know what my role is, I know what I need to focus on, and doing that, and making sure that the team as a whole has that trust. And we do a lot of team building activities, whether it's in sports or even in the workplace. And building that culture more than just work stuff is huge. You know, getting to know your staff. At, say, the airport, I have about 170 staff, and I try to really get to know them. And you realize what people are going through. I mean, coaching hockey, you have kids that are coming from broken families, you have kids that are, you know, all sorts of different backgrounds and situations and scenarios, and you realize that everybody has a story, everybody's going through something, and whether that's in sports or in our professional life, right? So it's trying to develop something that is stronger than just the hockey, you know, or the workplace or whatever, right? But I mean, trying to build a positive culture and let everyone has something to you know, they can provide. Everyone can provide, you know, value in some way, shape, or form. And you have no idea the people's experiences. And I've learned that a lot at the airport. I mean, a lot of the people that we have working for us have, I think we have like 12 master's degrees. One guy has a PhD. Like, it's crazy sometimes the different backgrounds people have or the stories they have that you know nothing about.
Yeah.
You know, and connecting on a different level and developing a culture where people feel heard, they feel valued. And that's to say whether it's in sports or in life, right?
I think that's important, and something I talk a lot about when it comes to leadership. Leadership is about people. It's not about managing things, projects, processes, whatever. It's people, and that's at the heart of leadership, what makes a good leader. Wondering here, like, you mentioned that practice, winning in the practice, locker room is important. It's easy to kind of pinpoint how that looks in sports. Do you have some thoughts on how that looks like in the professional life? What does practice look like in preparing for whatever, you know, the game is?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about being on stage and being a performer, and that, you know, for us, we have these blue vests that our team wears. But just like in sports, when the team, you know, they put on their jersey, it's like it's time to perform, and whether that's practice, you got to kind of always look at, you know, imagine, okay, like you're playing for an audience, or you're in a game, or the CEO of the airport's walking by, whatever that may be. What are we doing to make sure that we're always working to get better? You know, 4 things I talk about at the airport are, you know, creating wow. How can we provide a memorable experience for a passenger? Getting 1% better each day. Owning your circle. We talk a lot about that in sports and at work. It's like, okay, the 20 meters around you, what are you doing to take ownership and a responsibility? And then managing the details, right? It's those little things I talk about from good to great, but it's really trying to take that. But again, whether it's practice or in the workplace, and I mean, in hockey, we talk a lot about, you know, how you're going to do these things is how you're going to perform when it's game time. And I had a football coach who, like, we would go back and forth bear crawling and running sprints, and guys are puking and everything. He's like, we may not be the most talented group, and I can assure you, you guys aren't, but you'll be the best conditioned team out there, you know? But we talk a lot about when there's training. It's like, okay, it's 4th quarter. I mean, I talked to my son this morning. He had 1 exam left, and he's like, Dad, I don't know if I can do it. I said, son, the ball's on the 1-yard line. You just got to dig deep. And then we're a family of faith, and we talked about a few different verses there, but I mean, just perseverance and like running through the finish line and getting in that mindset, blocking out the distractions. If I can talk a little bit on the distraction side of things. You know, I had a job when I was 18 years old. I worked at a travel agency and going through all these relationship issues, and I had this boss. She came to me and she goes, Mike, do you see the coat rack there? I'm like, yeah, I hung my jacket up. I didn't just throw it on the floor like at home. And she's said, what I want you to do is whatever's bugging you right now, if it's a relationship thing or you're bothered by something, you know, hockey or whatever, he goes, I want you to physically take whatever's bothering you and physically hang it up on the coat, on the coat rack. Physically hang it up. And she goes, you're not forgetting about it, you're not burying it, you're literally hanging it up. You're coming here, you're getting into this different mindset. I was a travel agent, it wasn't really that wasn't, like running into burning buildings. I was like booking your trip to Mexico. It was, but it was one of those things. But she goes, Mike, the greatest thing is that when you leave work, grab your coat, grab that, it's okay. And, it's something that it really has gotten, assisted in a lot of things, whether it's hockey or whatever with kids, saying, hey, there's all this stuff going on, hang it up, you're not burying it, it's still going to be there, but let's just focus on this and let's strive to do this. And that's been something that has been advice that has stuck with me for, well, I was 18, so for at least 9 years. But no, I mean, that's something that certainly has helped, you know, as far as trying to get in a mindset that, because I said there's so many things going on right now and so many distractions, and especially now with kids, is, you know, we have all sorts of things that we never dealt with before. Is, you know, when I was playing, you know, junior B hockey even, it was very different than hockey now. And looking at how can we help kids develop into good human beings.
That's so good. You know, one thing I picked up and maybe a common denominator as you were pointing out a few different things is you got to be intentional. You really got to be intentional about those, whether it was the 4 things that you shared about what you do at the airport. It doesn't happen by accident. And when we're intentional on living our lives or whatever we do, then things happen, right? And I want to speak to whoever's in here maybe feeling like, okay, well, maybe I don't really connect with what Mike's saying because I'm not really a leader or I'm not a business owner or wherever you're at. I continue to say this because I have a podcast and we talk about it matters. All the details matter. And leadership, if you want to get into a conversation with me, I'm going to tell you you're a leader. The question here is, where's your capacity as a leader? And leadership applies whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a volunteer, even if you think an employee of a job where you don't own it, but you're making a difference. And so I hope that coming out of here today, you're going to have a different perspective or at least be encouraged on that. Would love to hear, is there a piece of advice? I mean, you've given us some really good nuggets today to kind of chew on, but is there something that really sticks out to you right now that you go, hey, I got you, and you got these people in front of you, you guys should take this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's one thing I'll share is, I think to appreciate the wins that you have, but at the same time, to not settle for that. We have a neighborhood in our town, and you know, there was no disrespect. We'll call it, I don't know, Blueville. We'll call it Blueville. And so my son comes to me, and he has a 78% on a test. And we have a rule: if you get under 80, you tell mom and dad, and we have to have a conversation. And my kids are all different, but Nasland, our oldest son, we know what he's capable of. And he comes to us with this mark, and I said, what is up with this? And he's like, Dad, it was the 3rd highest mark in class. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? He's like, well, it was the 3rd highest mark in class. So he said, so I took him on a drive, and I said, okay, son, I want you to picture me the nicest house you could imagine. And he's talking about love an acreage, love a pool, all these different things. I'm like, okay, it's a pretty nice house. Then we drove through our town, and we'll call it through Blueville. We drove through Blueville, and I'm like, I want you to pick out the nicest house here. Which one is your favorite? And he's like, well, you know, Blueville isn't exactly the nicest part of town. And he's like, okay, how about this one? I said, okay, so this would be your house here? He goes, well, I'd like my dream house, but this is the house I would take here. I said, okay, how did you finish in your exam? He goes, well, I got 3rd. I said, okay, well, I guess we got to find the 3rd nicest house here. And we kind of have a saying, you know, don't be Blueville. And yes, it's one thing to compare yourself to others, but don't allow the top person in that room to be your standard. Don't let that be your measuring stick. So Nasland will often say something, I say, okay, well, awesome. I mean, you know, there's the thing of being, you know, the king of Poop Mountain, and it's like, don't be Blueville. Don't do that. And again, we celebrate successes, but you know, he's 14 and he's wanting to, you know, talking about scholarships, whether it be, you know, lacrosse or different sports and stuff. And we often say, like, I said, son, when you're competing to get into top universities, or you're competing to get onto a world stage like Kate was on, I mean, these are things that's great that you got the 3rd highest mark at Holy Spirit Christian School, but that is probably not going to get you into the university that you want to get to with that mindset.
Right.
So, you know, as I say, it's, you know, don't be Blueville, or as we say, don't be Chungo. That's what our saying is. And I think it's a reminder to him. I said, son, it's never a disrespect to anybody that lives in these homes or this and that. It was just trying to paint that picture, because I said, we drive around this neighborhood, son. I said, how close are these homes to your dream house that you described to me? And he's like, well, there's nothing like it. And I said, yeah, but I said, the measuring stick you're using by thinking it's great to have this third mark in this class, I said, you know, and I said, I'm proud of you for working hard and everything, but I just never wanted them to have that mindset that, okay, if you have dreams to have this, you can't then use this as your measuring stick. So that's probably
I love it. Thank you. No, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me up here and sharing some amazing wisdom.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That was my conversation with Mike Lazenby at the iConnect party. Wasn't there some great nuggets and insight out of that conversation? I really hope you enjoyed it. And can you do me a favor? If you know anybody that should listen to this episode, can you share it with them? Can you comment? Let me know what you think. Can you like it? As we continue to expand this leadership community, we're just trying to get this out to as many people as we can. And so I appreciate you joining me on this episode, and I'll catch you on the next one. But all you leaders out there, remember that leading well matters.